Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 342 of the MTGGoldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we have the full crew here this week, kicking things off with the owner of MTGGoldfish, Richard. How's it going today, Richard?
Hey Seth, doing well. Finally, a full week without preview cards.
No new cards to talk about. That is a rarity. That almost never happens, but it's a week without spoilers for once. But don't worry, it'll be coming soon with Innistrad Midnight Hunt. But before we get into today's topic, we got another co-host in Krim. Good morning, Krim. How's it going today?
Morning, Seth. It goes well. I think I fixed my sleep schedule. I don't know. I'm not really sure, but like the thing is, yeah. I had a full night's rest, so.
Nice. A full night's rest is always a good thing. So anyway, today we're kind of bouncing around. Like we said, there's no spoilers to talk about, but we have some interesting topics. We wanted to talk about Jumpstart Historic Horizons being delayed. So we're going to start off there. Want to talk a little bit about the price of Modern, thanks to Modern Horizon sets, roping on Arena. Mark Rosewater released his State of Design article. So we're going to talk about that too before getting to fish mail. So bouncing here and there, talking about tons of different Magic stuff. But before we get into all that, a reminder that our show today is brought to you by Card Conduit. And Card Conduit, you've probably heard about them from us before. They're a great way to sell your Magic collection, and they're offering a new service geared towards smaller batches of valuable cards with a reduced service fee. With their curated shipment service, you can sell your cards for the best available buy list price with only a 5% fee. And as with all Card Conduit services, you don't got to sort your cards, you don't got to grade them, nothing like that. You just safely pack them up, ship them out, and they'll even send you a detailed report with the results, so you can check out the Card Conduit curated shipment option as a way to buy lists up to 150 cards with fast processing, optimized prices, and the low service fee of just 5%. And right now, you can even get a 10% discount by heading over to cardconduit.com/goldfish. Card Conduit, they're the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. So thank you so much to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And let's talk some Magic. Let's start with some news that came out actually right after, I think the day after we podcasted last week, which Historic Horizons being delayed. Richard, what's up with that? What are the deets?
All right. Historic Horizons, the new digital exclusive Magic Arena set, originally planned for August 10th. That's passed. That hasn't happened. It was moved to August 24th. So 2 weeks into the future. And then, so what that means is the period between Historic Horizons and Innistrad, the new standard set, is now greatly reduced. Innistrad starts like the first week of September. Yeah, that's happening. And then Wizards, along with this announcement, has a whole bunch of changes to like the events and ranked and stuff like that they were planning. That is now all put into chaos because they had to delay Historic Horizons. We're getting Jumpstart a bit later than expected.
Yeah, Jumpstart later, and also Innistrad a bit later than they originally announced too. This hasn't been something that's been talked about much. The paper release date didn't change, but they also, in the same article where they released the delay of Historic Horizons, it also has the updated date of Innistrad's release, which is back to September 16th now, when it was going to be September 9th before. So they pushed back Innistrad digitally a little bit, which I guess that's okay, although a little bit awkward right now because people are just like counting down the days to rotation, so a little bit disappointing. Krim, what do you think about this delay of Historic Horizons? I know you were pretty hyped about it. I was pretty hyped about it too, with all the new cards and new decks that I wanted to build. What do you think?
Well, I mean, okay. It's okay if like the reason why they had to push everything back just because like the set doesn't work, right? Like there's stuff that hasn't happened in Magic before, like the call it whatever you will, but the Hearthstone-y cards, you know, all those mechanics, maybe that breaks the client. Sure. But I am a little bit bummed because they've pushed it back to a point where now it overlaps with like a bunch of other things, which could potentially like kind of kill the hype a little bit, I guess. Because isn't it supposedly then spoiler season for Midnight Hunt starts right at the release now?
Yeah,
it is, right?
We don't know the official date, but we do know that the 24th is their big like preview stream for the next year of Magic sets, and I think everyone's assuming that the 26th or the 30th will be the start of spoiler season officially. So maybe there's like a couple days before spoilers start, but it might be starting literally on the exact same day that Historic Horizons releases. So yeah, it's going to be real close to spoiler season.
So that pretty much means right as I'm sure you, me, and all of us here, we make content, right, for Historic Jumpstart or whatever. Right as we're doing that, we'll have about a week, and then we'll have to just pretty much be through all the content and then be ready for Midnight Hunt, I think. So that's going to be a pickle, a bind, but I mean, if it has to happen, then I guess it has to happen. I was really excited to play with a lot of the new cards. I'm hoping that the reason why is that they're going back and they're making sure everything works and isn't super buggy. Cause we haven't had this before, right? Like a lot of these kind of mechanics and stuff like that. So I'm very curious how they interact with the game.
Yeah, there is new stuff that they've never done before. So I guess it makes sense that it maybe takes more work on their end than other sets that are mostly like reusing mechanics or cards that we've seen in the past or very similar to other cards. My main disappointment was kind of like you. There was like, if it released when it was supposed to on like August 10th or 12th or whatever it was, there's like a couple of weeks where there's no spoilers and I could just like build new historic decks, and I was really looking forward to that. But now it's going to be during spoiler season or close to spoiler season, so I'm going to be doing all that stuff. So that was my biggest disappointment. The other thing that kind of struck me is weird is like what happened within like a couple of weeks, because remember, this isn't some set that they announced like a year ago. Like most sets we know are coming for like 6 months or a year and we're kind of waiting. They like announced this and did spoiler season kind of out of the blue just a couple of weeks ago. Like just, hey, all of a sudden there's this new set and no one knew it was coming. But then within like a couple of weeks, like by the time spoilers ended, they're having to delay it. That's a little bit concerning. I'm starting to wonder if just with the pace of releases, both in digital and in paper, like maybe Wizards is having a hard time keeping up with it. Like I feel bad for like the devs and stuff. Like it seems like a lot of work, and with so many products coming up, maybe we've talked about how we sometimes struggle with the pace of like just new sets and new products. Maybe Wizards is struggling with that too. Do you think there's any chance they're just like having a hard time keeping up with all the sets they're making at this point?
100%. I mean, that's kind of like what we had touched upon last week with the announcement of Midnight Hunt and all that stuff. And it was mostly just that, like, okay, I don't mind the, like just perpetually being in spoiler season. As long as it doesn't like, come at a cost of like, all right, well, are they short staffed on all this stuff, right? Cause can WotC themselves keep up with their release schedule? And it sounds like if that maybe now there's just so many things going on that they can't, and that might be problematic. So I mean, I hope, because like the devs are going to be under a lot of pressure and whatnot. Hopefully the entire arena team grows and there's just a bunch of people working on the game with them, because we're always in spoiler season now.
I'll give you guys a secret to a software business and team management. Usually adding people to the team does not help.
Really?
They're kind of screwed. So they can't add people now. That definitely will not help, right? They can add people now for hopes of like in a year they're faster, right? So there's always a big delay. More chefs in the kitchen when your kitchen is non-functional does not help at all. But yeah, I guaranteed the cards didn't work, or they were like, yeah, we could do it, or maybe someone even promised without even checking with the devs that they could do it in this time frame, but they were like, oh boy, none of these cards work, we need to push it back 2 weeks. Will it launch successfully? I don't know. Will we have like the Moto special where we launch and we're like, these 6 cards are disabled, wait for them, they'll come in the future? I don't know, but Yeah, it's guaranteed the Hearthstone mechanics are something new. And Wizards struggles with just adding random cards, right? Like a new set comes out, it shouldn't be that hard. They struggle with adding those cards anyway, so when a new set has something very, very different, they're in for a good time. So I feel for the devs, but I don't know. But I don't know why Wizards couldn't foresee this, why they don't ramp up their digital team if they're having explosive growth driven by digital and arena. Like, why their digital team seems to always be struggling. Like, that seems weird. But as players, the one single benefit we got from this is 3 free drafts from Amonkhet Remastered, Kaladesh Remastered, and Ikoria, in theory, to help you prep for the upcoming Historic. So, yeah, I guess 3 free drafts. Woo!
I mean, that is something, at least, which is nice. Like, so I'm glad that they did some sort of compensation. One thing that occasionally drives me crazy with arenas, they like to give out compensation that's just like progress and the mastery tree, which is like, oh, here's some XP, and I'm like, I didn't even buy the mastery pass this time, so
I've already completed my tree.
Yeah, so getting drafts is, at least that's a nice gesture. The other thing that got wrecked by this was they have a big tournament coming up, the MPL and Rivals Gauntlet, the first week in September. And it was supposed to be historic with all the new cards from Historic Horizons, but because of this, they switched it to standard. So it's like 3 days and 12 rounds of standard, like during the middle of spoiler season, like a week before rotation. I expect it to be like the least popular tournament they've ever run. And maybe at this point it doesn't matter because they're pulling the plug on all that anyway, but I would have been actually pretty excited to see what the pros did with new Historic, but I have zero interest in watching a huge tournament the last week of standard before rotation. So a little bit unfortunate there as well.
I thought MPL was done. Like, when is the official ending of it?
Hold on. I thought tournament life was done.
Yeah, it's like ending after the season or something. So they're just kind of like, it's the lame duck thing. They're just kind of like playing out the string, and everyone knows it's ending, but they are finishing off what they had already started, basically.
Okay.
It's weird.
That's a little weird. Maybe they should just announce it when it finishes, rather than having like when you're out of contention for the rest of the year and you start putting in your C squad and like playing random stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it's a little awkward.
Anyway, let's move on and hit up another topic. A topic I actually just wrote an article on. You can read it over at MTGGoldfish.com. It went up yesterday, which is the price of Modern. So I love Modern Horizons. Like, seriously, Modern Horizons, Modern Horizons 2 are two of my favorite sets that Wizards has ever made. I actually like the upheaval of Modern. I know there's concerns about it like rotating the format and making people buy new decks, which those are legitimate, but as someone who mostly pays with a loan program on Magic Online and can easily switch decks, I love all the new cards, all the new archetypes, all the changes. So in general, I'm a huge fan of Modern Horizons. However, I was looking at our metagame pages this week, and I was seeing a lot of decks that were like 1,300, 1,500, and just a couple of years ago, that was like Jund territory. Like, you'd look at the metagame page, and you see a bunch of, 500, 800, maybe $1,000 decks, and then you'd have Jund that was like 1,500, 1,700, some absurdly high price, but it was pretty rare for decks to be, over $1,000 and significantly over. Now we're at a point where Modern is incredibly expensive. The average deck price is somewhere around $1,100 for the top 12 most played decks in the format. So if you want to get like a legitimate tier 1 deck, and the biggest reason isn't that Wizards isn't reprinting cards, it's that these new Modern Horizon cards are incredibly expensive. You have Force and Negation, you got Ragavan, you got Wrenn and 6. These are 4 of constructed staples that are costing $400 a playset or something. That's a huge cost and a huge increase to deck prices. So that's something I've been thinking about and wondering about, and I wanted your opinion on it. Like, is it worth it? Like, is the upsides of Modern Horizons and the fun, is it worth it considering the drawback of the format getting even more expensive? I'm just afraid we're like heading on this legacy trajectory where if Modern is going to be $1,500, $2,000 to buy a top tier deck, yikes, that's going to price a lot of people out of the format. And, eventually you're going to see what happens to Legacy and Vintage, where because people can't afford to play the format, it kind of has this negative snowball where eventually less and less people play. Because less people play, there's less support. And then pretty soon you have, it exists on Magic Online, but that's really all that Vintage is or Legacy is at this point. So what do you guys think about the increase in prices in Modern brought about by Modern Horizon sets?
Well, I mean, that is definitely a concern, right? Considering that like, even a simple deck like Control or Mill is like now getting like over $1,000, right? So, but the thing here is with these supplemental sets, these sets like example Modern Horizons 2 and Modern Masters, whatever, right? All these things, they kind of make it so that it Modern goes on sale like in a windows, right? So the fetch lands come out, everything else around the fetch lands go up because everybody has the lands now, they want to buy into the game. So the lands get a little cheap. And then I guess up next, I hope they reprint Ragavan and they reprint that stuff, and that stuff gets like the Tarmogoyf treatment, which would then make it cost less. And then I'm assuming when that costs less, then the lands go back up. So they'll just they're always going to be behind the curve, but they've got to keep reprinting these cards to keep the prices down if they want to make it so that the format is actually accessible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure. I know in the past, I think we strongly needed more reprints, and I still think we need more reprints. The more reprints, the better. Like, that is never going to complain about reprints. But at the same time, like, a lot of these problems, like, it's hard to reprint Ragavan when it's like currently in print and like a month old. like that's a little silly because it's like you can go and buy a box. Like, the card is available, the set is available. I think that the other thing that Wizards should really strongly consider doing is bumping down the rarity of some of the mythics in the set. Like, I think it's really hard for me to find a justification based on the traditional definition of mythics as being like these big splashy spells and not just, the most competitive constructed cards of the set, but cards like Ragavan or even like Endurance. Renin 6 gets a pass because that's a planeswalker and those are always mythics, but like Seasoned Pyromancer, these kind of like 4 of utility cards, they aren't big and splashy, they're just good on rate and they're cheap and they're efficient. I really think it would go a long way if Wizards would start putting those at rare rather than mythic, because I think that's one of the big issues is the supply of those cards is just pretty low because they're at mythic, and the box prices are so high that allows those mythics to have even a higher price tag because the boxes are just so much more expensive than a normal set.
I mean, it's all Wizards design, right? I actually think Ragavan is a mythic. Like, the card does a lot of things, and it does a lot of weird things, and I think it is mythic worthy. It's just not worthy of its price tag, right? Wizards could fix this by putting it, making, like, say, Modern Horizons 2 a normally priced set, right? Like a standard set, putting it in other products, stuff like that. But they chose not to, right? And the biggest problem, like, I'm out of the paper Modern game, right? Because here's the problem, right? So, like Krim said, when Master sets come around, certain cards go on a discount. For example, fetch lands. You could pick those up, right? And what happens is, like, every card around that card will go up in price, right? So if you're, like, eyeing, say, Death Shadow, and you want, like, say, Street Wraith or something, when they reprint Street Wraith, like, Bauble goes to like $1 billion. So you wait for the Bauble to get reprinted, it goes down, and then something else skyrockets, and then the price of your deck is always the same. And that was kind of accepted, but now what's happening is the metagame shifts so fast, right? Now that it takes you like a year to assemble your Death Shadow deck, it may no longer be relevant, right? And maybe now you need to pick up a playset of Ragavans, or Force of Negations, or whatever, right? And you're just basically endlessly chasing this, and the result is you get no discount, right? You want the deck, you need to buy it now, right? You need to pay whatever $1,000 and then call it a day. You can't really pick up the pieces in like little chunks because something else in your deck will go up in price, and then they'll print a new staple, and then maybe Hammer Time is the best deck for some reason, right? Like, you don't know what's going on. It changes too fast now, so you just gotta suck it up and take the hit and get the deck if you really want it, right?
Yeah, and I mean, modern might just be very, very expensive, and that's just going to always be the case, right? Like, but this will just have to be like, I guess, how Legacy was, except for you can actually get reprints and stuff like that. So that
those were
nice.
stable, right? Like theoretically, 5 years ago, you paid like through the roof for your Legacy deck, and it was good for like 4 or 5 years. Like
yeah,
that was back in the day, right?
But
nowadays, you're like, I need the latest standard cards, right? Like I need all the latest standard cards such that I can compete, and those standard cards are like mythics, right? And you have to pay, to upgrade your deck with a set of Ragavans is like what? Like $300 or something, right?
Yeah, I don't even have Ragavans, so I just I don't even play them. I can't because I just can't justify buying monkeys.
Yeah, I feel like a few years ago, you could actually make a pretty strong argument that even though the deck prices were a lot higher, Modern was actually the cheaper format to play in the long run because you buy your Jund or your Affinity or your whatever, Splinter Twin, a deck that, is top tier, has been for a long time, probably will be for a long time. And then you make some, small upgrades, Fatal Push comes out and you add Fatal Push into your removal suite or whatever. You get a new random Spell Pierce effect that you can play in your Splinter Twin deck, but without like putting in a ton more money, you would have a competitive deck that you could play for a number of years. I think that has definitely changed now. Like the meta changes really quickly and it changes really severely. Like if you look at the Modern meta game page right now, it's a whole bunch of new decks. Like many of the top decks in the meta are essentially Modern Horizons 2 decks. You have the Tempo decks with Dragon Rage Channeler and with the Monkey. You got the Elemental Evoke decks. You got the Cascade Crashing Footfall decks. Mill is another deck that kind of came out of nowhere. So the metagame is very, very different. So I think the days are gone when you could be like, okay, it costs a ton of money, but I'm going to be able to use this deck for a long time. Because at this point, between bannings and new cards being printed, there really is no guarantee. Even if you buy one of those traditionally good decks like Jund or something, there's no guarantee it's going to remain good. And even if it does, there's still going to be a big cost. Jund is a great example of this. Like you buy your Jund deck and you're like, okay, spent $1,500, but I got a deck that I can play in Modern for the next 5 years. But then a year later, Wrenn and 6 comes out, and you got to spend $400 to get a place at a Wrenn and 6 if you want your Jund deck to be competitive, or I guess you could play Strangleroot Geist instead. But most people go with the Wrenn and 6 plan. And then a year after that, 2 years after that, you have Ragavan that comes out, and you're like, okay, now I got to spend $300 or $400 to have Ragavan to actually have a competitive version of Jund. So even if your deck is still playable, the upgrades cost a lot of money. Control decks had to buy 4 Force Negations. That's $400 for like a relatively slight upgrade, but one that you really need to be able to compete in the format.
Yeah.
I remember the last Grand Prix Vegas we went to where I hit you with Grim Player, Crim. that was like, I don't know what that was, like circa 2015 Jund.
Yeah.
I'm like, let's update, right? Like Modern Horizons 1 just came out. And I'm like, to update my deck costs like $1,000. I'm like, okay, yeah. I think we're gonna play Grim Players instead here, and like it's expensive and it's really hard. Like I think Modern is a digital only format now, right? Like you play on Moto with a loan program such that you can swap into the latest tech, and Modern is so unforgiving. Like you don't have like a force of will to fall back on, right? Like you actually need a strong deck to like keep up, and it's like, I don't know, it's very expensive and you need to be meta. So I think being on Magic Online makes it really easy to swap in and out of cards. Using loan programs makes it really easy to swap in and out of cards, so you can always keep up to date and not be stuck with like some weird formerly tier 1 deck now is a tier 5 deck.
Where do eternal formats go in paper, do you think? I think that's the bigger concern. I agree that it's way easier on Magic Online, but with paper Magic coming back and a lot of desire for paper Magic, I don't think that's going away. We have Legacy and Vintage, which are fringe formats because they're way too expensive. We have Modern, which is getting more and more expensive to actually play and maintain a collection. And then we have Pioneer, which isn't really supported or super popular right now. Where does that leave us for 60 card form? Or does it not matter now? And paper's just all about playing Commander, and it doesn't really matter about these other formats. But what do you think? Like, are we on a bad trajectory for 60 card competitive formats in paper at this point outside of Standard?
That's tough. I don't know. A lot of that's like seems like it's like a lot of speculation. So I can't really, that's a tough one.
We play casual.
Yeah.
we play like, hey, you want to play 2015 Jund versus like 2017 Tron? Like we're all like tier 5 decks nowadays, but let's go.
Are we rule zeroing in Modern? Is that what's up? I don't want to play against Tron. I don't want to play.
It's like if you play Vintage, right? Like chances are the person you're playing doesn't have like the perfect deck, right? Like there's probably budget allowances in there or proxies or something, right? Unless you're actually playing at like a high stakes tournament. So we're going to end up with the same thing, right? Where I'm playing suboptimal Jund or I'm playing suboptimal Control or something because I didn't want to pay for the whatever latest cards, right? And hopefully my opponent is also playing a suboptimal deck and then we just play and we have a good time. Like, is that it? And if you're a tournament player trying to like, win a Grand Prix, then that's part of your cost to like rotate your Modern deck like every season, right?
How much does the suboptimal part bother you guys? So I've never had to deal with that too much just because I always play on Moto. So I can always have whatever cards I want thanks to loan programs. Like when you play Jund with Grimflayer over Ren and 6 or whatever, are you drawing Grimflayer and being like, oh my god, this should really be a Ren and 6? I don't know. Or is it just fine? Like, does it bother you to play suboptimal decks because of for budget reasons?
I've been playing Jund for years, Seth.
Yes.
You've been fully powered. I don't know what you're talking about, right? You're like, I play Tarmogoyf. You win the game with an Uro, right? I don't know, right? It's like, you kind of have to just accept it, right? Like, it's like, the alternative is I play Uro, and I can't do that. So Tarmogoyf will have to do, right? So
Control has been, much like Jund, has just been suboptimal forever. In Modern, so like I it's just now where it's like, whoa, Control's like kind of respectable, right? Like, okay, it's able to fight, the big meta that is Modern. So I've always had the suboptimal cards. Stuff matter of fact, I mean, when I first met Richard, I was playing something ridiculous and suboptimal. I think I met him at an F&M and I was playing blue-black Control and I was on Mystical Teachings getting up Torrential Gearhulk and I thought that was funny.
Gear Hulked me in Modern.
Yeah.
Goodness. This is happening.
And then I remember Richard just going, wait, can Jund kill this?
But I asked that to all my opponents, though.
Yeah, also fair.
I'm like, wait, you can do that? That's allowed?
All right, let's keep moving on. We got another good topic here with Magic Arena. So there's been a bit of a conversation in the community in the last couple days about roping on Arena, and more specifically, the idea of like roping on Arena. Not accidentally, or not even necessarily like at the end of the game when your opponent gets a lucky top deck and your opponent ropes for the last turn, but roping from at the beginning of the game because you don't like the decks that your opponent's playing as a way to kind of like punish your opponents. Is that something that either of you have run into? Like, how big of a problem is roping on Arena? So is it a problem, and is there anything we can do about it? Because I haven't run into it super often, but when it does happen, with how the timeout system works, especially if it's in the late game and your opponent's been able to save up a few timeouts, you got to sit there for quite a while to burn through all the ropes before it ends. So what do you guys think about roping on Arena?
Man, filming content, streaming, all of it, right? Like, while you're doing all of that, you're gonna run into a roper. I feel like almost every third match I have now, maybe my rate's a bit higher because of the decks I like playing, but I do.
You're very ropeable, Krim.
I definitely feel like no matter what the format is, if it's historic brawl, if it's whatever, I am always happy to get roped. Because I live for that. I am thriving and I am feeding off the sodium of the roping player. I love it. It's obviously bad form and I understand why people don't like it, but I would never do it. But if it happens to me, like my chat knows, anyone who's watched my YouTube content has seen it because, I make sure we put that match in the video because I am having the time of my life. I get to practice my dad jokes. I get to do all this stuff. I get to talk to chat, I don't know why people do it. I don't know why people do it. It's like, just leave. I mean, if you aren't having a good time, or if there's a commander you're sitting across that you're upset about, just leave. Like you don't have to play. If you rope, only thing you're doing is on the other side is just, you're getting me who's cackling like maniacally and just like seriously loving it every second of it.
I guess that is a good way to defeat ropers. If you like it, that does kind of defeat the whole purpose, because people obviously do it to try to make you like salty or punish you. So if you're not getting salty or feeling punished and you're having a good time, then I guess roping can't really affect you.
Yeah, I'm never fazed by roping. I'm usually just like, please rope. Honestly, if I could give you my timeouts, I would.
What about you? What about you, Richard?
I mean, it is so incredibly toxic, right?
Oh, yeah.
And Wizards definitely needs to do something about it. And so I'll give you a secret. If you ever find me in a match anywhere, Moto, Arena, whatever, if you slow play slow enough, I will concede, right? Even in ranked, even in a paid event, right? Like, it's not worth my time to sit through this, right? Like, it's just not worth my time, right? I'd rather concede and play the next match, and I'll probably end up like making, climbing the ladder faster than sitting through someone who's like just like roping every turn, or when, I guess if they're really salty and roping before they lose, I'll wait that one out. But, slow play, roping when you don't need to be roping, like double queuing, triple queuing, like doing the dishes in the middle of your match or whatever, right? Like, these should not be allowed, right? There should be a way to report players, or either like ban them outright or just have them face each other. Right? Like, if you like to rope
the
every game
roping
because
queue.
you're slow, go to the roping queue, right? Like, yeah, whatever, right? I don't care. Like, but it's a really bad look if I, sign in, play Arena, and then everyone's just roping every turn. And I'm like, I'm not doing anything. It's wasting my time. I don't know what you're doing. Like, you're wasting your time. So there should be a report function. There should be an automatic way where Wizards, if the board state is empty and they're roping, right? And they're roping every turn, or let's say they're alt tabbed out, right? Is there ever a real reason to be alt tabbed out and roping? Wizards should just like give you some kind of mark on your account, put you in the roping queue, and then ban you eventually, just to clean it up. Like, this happens in all games, right? Like, League of Legends, Fortnite, whatever. Like, there's always people there's like holding the lobby hostage, right?
Yeah.
And it's a big struggle, but Wizards should do something about it.
I mean, yeah, like it's pretty absurd that I think, does the best of one queue even have a timer anymore? Like,
there's not a visible one. I don't think there is a clock in best of one. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a little upsetting, right? I mean, for some people who just want to play, and it's like, sorry, dude, I dunked you. I mean, why are you so mad right now? but like for others, they do have places to be, right? Stuff like that. So I think ropers and stuff like that really are a little bit of a stain on the game. So I honestly don't know why they don't add a timer into best of one. A visible one at least. And then I don't know why, like much like Richard said, I don't know why they don't have a way to report that. I'd like to report a bug. My opponent is the bug. So
I actually really like the idea of having slow players queue against each other, because that's kind of what they're doing with this new historic brawl thing, where they're like, oh, we're going to unban Golos, which everyone hates and super busted, but don't worry, we're going to take care of it with matchmaking. So if you're not playing, a busted Golo style deck, you won't have to play against Golos at all or very often, because they're all going to battle against each other. I don't know why you couldn't do that by like monitoring the pace at which someone normally plays on their account. And if you're someone who usually plays really slow, or you're roping consistently, dump them into a match against someone else who plays that same play style. And then the people who are, focused and trying to play at a reasonable pace don't have to deal with it as often. It drives me crazy when people do it. Like, I definitely is annoying for sure. I try to look on the positive side and think, okay, maybe, you know, this person had an emergency or something came up, or Arena has a bug, or their internet went out, instead of just thinking like, oh, what a jerk, which is kind of the natural impulse when someone does that. So I try to look on the positive side, but the idea of people like talking about just like straight up, if I don't like the deck that you're playing, I'm just gonna rope you from the very start of the game. That's brutal. Like I can get why you play a long game and it's really close and your opponent gets the perfect top deck and they beat you. It's immature, obviously, and wrong and toxic to rope there, but I can see that impulse. You got salty, something went wrong in game, and you're upset, and that leads to you roping. Just roping from the very start of the game, though, like that seems especially
you're upset
toxic
from the previous game, so you carry it into the next game.
You're still salty.
You played a salty deck, and then now your next opponent has the same salty deck, right? So now, what do you do? So I think it shouldn't be encouraged. Like, even the salty rope at the end, like, nah, right?
Yeah,
like
that's wrong
like,
too.
I wasn't Arena and like, you know, be sad, but like, you know, don't take it out on like innocent other people, right?
Yeah, no, that is just as toxic. But I can understand the impulse more than the like, oh, I fire up a game and don't. Because if you fire up a game and you don't like the deck, just scoop. Like, it costs you nothing. It's Arena. It doesn't cost you any amount of dollars to just concede and fire up another game and hopefully run into a deck that you do want to play against or that you don't mind playing against and have a good time. Because when it comes down to it, we play Magic to have fun. And I just do not understand how sitting there intentionally roping because you don't like your opponent's deck can meet that definition of fun. Like, it seems like you're hurting yourself just as much as you're trying to hurt your opponent or whatever. So just concede. There's nothing wrong with conceding. Like, I do it sometimes. I fire up and I'm trying to like record and I hit rogues for the 4th time in a row and I'm just like, okay, like I've done this a few times, so I'm just gonna concede and like hit the, you know, play match button again, and hopefully it won't be rogues this time. And there's nothing wrong with that, but just don't try to punish your opponents by roping. It's just silly and immature and toxic. So I hope Wizards does something to improve it, because it's been an issue since the game started and it's not going away. And the timing system of Arena, I think, ends up making it worse in some ways compared to some other games. I think the timing system is necessary, like the ability to build up timeouts, because there are like legitimate games with big boards where I burned through 2 or 3 timeouts just trying to figure out an attack or figure out, you know, something like that in the late game. So I do think you need that system, but that system also ends up giving people who want a salty rope a big head up, essentially, to really stick it to their opponents or attempt to.
I mean, there's always available. You have the Moto 5-minute timeout, right? Like the disconnect, the rage, pull my modem out of my computer move, right? We're going back old school with that, right? So that there's always a way for that. But yeah, I think, and then I also think, so this is where it's important that content creators and other people of high status in the community should not encourage this behavior. They should not engage in it because it allows other people to copy, right? Like, they see, you know, if my biggest content creator that I follow does it, it must be okay if I do it, right? Or it's funny when they do it, so I'll do it too. So I think this is where setting a good example would help. And then obviously if WotC could do anything about it. Wait, what do you guys think about legit roping? Like, DoorDash came. you have to go away, but there's no chat. You can't tell your opponent, like, hold on, like, you know, like my roommate fell, I need to go help them or something, right? Like, shit, would chat help at all?
No, go. If we think the rope is toxic, you add chat into the game. Oh, well, let's just go with this. We've been around water cooler Magic talk, you know. So I get how upset Magic players can get. But for me, I don't know. I mean, I'm so used to the internet and online play that, to me, I always assume it's the worst. It's very rarely, like, when you assume for the better, like, oh, maybe they had to like, help somebody at the door, right? Or something like that. It's
How about old lady cross the street?
They were not doing that. They weren't doing their dishes. They weren't doing anything. The only thing that like they're doing is crying into something, and probably that's the only thing I could believe. They're crying into some object, and that's why they left the computer. But they're probably crying because of you. And like having played like League of Legends, all those games, I am so happy there is no chat. Usually you're always informed. Let's just go, to put it nicely, if there was a chat, there's always some form of, like their relationship with a parent figure of ours. And we're always, I'm often told about that in games with chats. So, I'm just happy we don't have that and I don't have to deal with that. So, and also, I don't mind the rope. I do think they should punish people for it, because I don't think roping is okay. But like if you run into me, you can rope as much as you want. Hell, I'll give you my ropes.
I'm fine with legitimate roping. I think there are times when stuff comes up. I've had times where I've ordered some food and the food comes, and like, what are you going to do other than like try to get your food real quick and make it back before your ropes run out? Like it's
so
like, I feel
rare.
a little bad when it happens, but it does happen. It is rare. It does happen every once in a while. Personally, I would be okay with an opt-in style chat, kind of like Magic Online has, where chat is there for people who want it, but you don't have to have chat. Because I do think being able to say, I have it happen on Moto, like semi-regularly, where someone's like, hey, I'm sorry, I gotta run grab this, I'll be right back. And it does make me much less frustrated than if I'm just sitting there for 2 or 3 minutes thinking, what's the deal with this opponent?
You already have chat. It's if you click on your portrait, you say your go. That's chat.
I don't think that's exactly the same. Maybe they could add a "I'm not salty" roping button that you click.
I'm roping for legit reasons. Don't ban me.
The legit rope button.
Imagine like a Teferi avatar or something. Hey, I'm not salt roping. BRB, or just they could add a BRB emote.
Yeah.
But then again, I can see that getting abused too immediately. BRB.
Oh yeah, maybe there's no good solution. So just don't do it. Don't rope people. Just scoop, go on to the next game. Think of your opponent who's also trying to have fun playing Magic. So that would be my advice. Just don't do it. It's very easy not to do.
Unless you're against me once again. You can cry as much as you want against me. I'll give you the shoulder.
Crim relishes it.
And you'll be often met with the laughing beholder emote. It's either that one or my personal favorite to BM back with is everyone grab a leg. That's all I say every time when I get a roper.
All right, let's move on to our last non-fish mail topic, which is Mark Rosewater's State of Design 2021 article, which actually just came out today. Every year, Mike Rosewater, for the last 15 years, has wrote a column going over Magic design for the year and actually going set by set. And there's some interesting stuff about, from his perspective and thereby Wizards' perspective, what they think went well this year, what they think didn't go well, based on whatever data they have, based on the feedback of the community. So, Richard, why don't you guide us through this State of Design article a little bit?
All right. It's a fairly long article, so you can check it on Daily MTG, but we'll go over some of the highlights. And you could also compare previous years to see how they stack up. But for this year, highlights for overall Magic design. A lot of Magic was purchased and played. This was the best year for Magic in terms of sales, both physical and digital. So despite COVID and the pandemic, Magic had its best year ever. I think it was a strong year for design resonance. Set boosters were a hit. So those are the 3 highlights. The 3 lessons they had were, we need to get better at extending our mechanical themes between sets. So people complaining where they had a cool mechanic and then they never saw it ever again. Modal double-faced cards didn't give the year the cohesiveness I was hoping for. So MDFCs were the theme that went through all the sets this year, but he felt it didn't do its job. Throne of Eldraine so strong, it didn't let others shine. Disclaimer was Mark is not responsible for this, but he had to throw it in here because he knew that everyone would be talking about this.
I mean, that it is true. That is also the biggest complaint that I have heard about
Wait.
Magic design in the past year.
Throne of Eldraine wasn't even that good, though. What do you mean?
Yeah, it was fine. It was fine.
It wasn't even that good.
So question, just out of this overall stuff, my big question was, I mean, well, obviously it's great that Magic is doing well and more has been purchased than ever, even during the pandemic. That's super impressive and encouraging, I guess. What do you think about the set booster thing? I have heard mostly mixed reactions on set boosters. Do you think they actually are a hit? Like, do you consider set boosters to be a hit? Because I kind of have considered them to be mediocre, maybe trending towards a bit of a flop compared to being a hit.
I kind of buy them over basic boosters. So I just treat them as the new booster. I kind of forget there's a base draft booster, to be honest, because I never play limited, right? So since I don't play limited, I don't really know, right? Like, I don't know what the fact that they try to make it flavorful and like put like, hey, the fireworks are at this part of the pack. That doesn't matter to me. I just go right to the, like, yeah, okay. Do I have a good card? No, I've opened another useless green card. Okay. So like that, but I do buy them. I treat the set boosters because they are the ones that come with like the variant artworks, right? Like, or like I guess have a higher probability. I don't really know. But the thing here is I've just treated them as the go-to set booster now. Or not set booster because they're a set booster, but you know,
For the set.
for the set.
Yeah, I gotcha.
I think that's working as Wizards intended, right? Like nobody really knows what's in a set booster, including Wizards if you read their documentation. But there's supposed to be like better draft boosters if you don't draft, right? And then with the ultimate being collector boosters, where you can get the most different treatments. So it looks like it's working. I don't know, right? There's no way to tell us other than like store sales data, right? Like when a random person comes in the store, do they buy draft boosters or set boosters? And I know from looking at WPN materials that they are highly pushing set boosters. That set boosters are the ones stores should be recommending to like a random person that comes in that doesn't know what they're doing. So it looks like it's working, although it's not really visible to us in any way, right? Like only Wizard sales data can tell us.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see that transition. I don't know. I've opened a few set boosters and I haven't been overly impressed with them, but I guess I also have started opening more collector's boosters if I'm going to open booster packs, and maybe compared to collector's boosters, it's just hard for set boosters to hold up because collector's boosters just have so much sweet stuff in them.
So would you like 2x set boosters or like 1 collector boosters, like whatever the equivalent value and price is? Which would you prefer to open or draft boosters?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so it'd probably be collector boosters, honestly. It varies a little bit based on set, and I put a lot of weight on EV and what's going to offer the most value. But everything equal, I would open 1 collector booster box over 2 set booster boxes, I think. So something else that's mentioned in this article a couple of times that I thought was interesting, because Mark Rosewater also goes set by set through all the sets released this year. He mentions under Commander Legends and also Modern Horizons 2, the players love the callbacks and the flavor callbacks and these old legendary characters that are getting cards again or for the first time. That's come up, and I think he's loved both times. If you read the article, he has like enjoyed, liked, and loved. So I'm assuming loved is like the strongest of those categories. What do you think about the fact that in this age of like new players and in this age of arena and in this age of everything changing, one of the things that went the most right for Magic in the past year is really old stuff, like callbacks to old cards, old legends, nostalgia. We saw that a little bit with Time Spiral Remastered too. Like should Wizards be doing more of that? Like, even in this new age where we're trying to do all this fresh, new, different, digital-only crazy stuff, is the most successful part of Magic, like, calling back to cards from 20 years ago that most Arena-era players probably don't even know exist, honestly?
I mean, I think it's pretty cool, right? Like, having callbacks and stuff like that. I mean, like, example, like, seeing Navinriel himself and in the art, you know, his disc is around his neck. So I do think that's pretty sweet. And it kind of shows you a little bit more about the lore of Magic. So I like that.
I love it too. It was one of my favorite parts of the past year. It's just seems odd to me because there's so many newer players who wouldn't get it. Like, the Navinriel only makes sense if you know Navinriel's disc. And if you're a new player, why would you even know Navinriel's disc? And that's maybe one of the more common ones, because disc does see some commander play. Some of the callbacks, like, I didn't even get to, like, just random old, like, mentioned in the flavor text on a card from Homelands or something. And then all of a sudden it's, like, referenced again in Modern Horizons 2 or in Time Spiral Remastered. What do you think, Richard?
Yeah, I think it's a freebie. Like, why wouldn't they do it? So either you make up a brand new character that nobody knows, or you use Navinriel, right? Which has some backstory. You can build the world. I really like it because it gives you an excuse to play the old card, right? You can play new Navinriel and then, like, throw the disc into your deck. So I actually really like it, and I think it's a very important part. Like, we keep talking about, like, Realms Beyond and all this stuff, but, like, the Magic world is very important, right? And the ability to call back to something iconic like a Shivan Dragon, or just like some random character like someone may have played with in, like, you know, 1999 or 2005, I think is one of the strengths of Magic over some of the newer games. So I think they should keep doing it as long as it makes sense and it's not forced for no reason. But, you know, as long as they give the characters, like, good treatment, their abilities are on flavor, and it makes some kind of sense, I think they should keep doing it.
One other thing before we hit fish mail that I wanted to ask you based on this article is the Forgotten Realms stuff is kind of interesting because that's the first crossover set we've had, and it's not exactly Universes Beyond, but it's a little bit similar to Universes Beyond, where we're kind of like going into a different world but doing it in a Magic set. And one of the lessons that Mark has is that the set was super polarizing. It created a very polar response where you had people who absolutely loved it, but then you had people who absolutely hated it. And it was interesting because some of the people hated it because they just don't like the idea of Magic cards using other IPs essentially. But then there was also people who really loved D&D who also disliked it because it didn't include their favorite character, or Terraskew or whatever wasn't powered up enough to, you know, be the D&D. Tarask isn't powered up enough to be the real D&D monster. Do you think that is a potential problem for Universes Beyond, where you have some Magic players who dislike it just because it's Universes Beyond, and then you're going to have some Lord of the Rings fans or Warhammer fans or whatever the crossover is that are going to dislike it because they're going to feel like you didn't do their thing justice, basically. You left out this character that really should have been there, or this one wasn't powerful enough, or this or that. Like, is there any, I don't know, potential issues you see from that moving forward with Universes Beyond in the near future?
This is one of the weird things, right? Because design team would have to also know the IP and love the IP, right? So imagine, like, you're working on the design team and you're like, well, I don't really like Lord of the Rings. Can you imagine not liking Lord of the Rings? Totally, right? And so,
seriously,
yes,
that's the greatest movie of all time.
Yeah, one of my
14 hours
favorites. Oh God, yeah, love it. So, whew. But yeah, like, if everyone on the team has to like the IP, you know what I mean? Like, that I feel like they have to be on board with the IP in order to design the card well. So there is a concern where, like, you know, maybe people just, they don't do justice to, like, I don't know, Gandalf or something like that. They made Gandalf a 1/1 artifact creature or something like that, right? Like, that would make zero sense. But the thing here is, I also think there's always going to be people that are upset with the way things are executed. So there's always going to be somebody who's like, oh, I think it should have been this way. This card should have been blue and black, right? So That's the line that they're going to have to walk when they do Universes Beyond. They're going to have make sure that everybody that's working on the set is on board with the IP, and is knowledgeable in the IP. And also on top of that, they're just always going to have somebody that's not happy with the way the cards turned out. However, I mean, I thought the D&D set was pretty cool. I don't play D&D. I don't know anything about D&D, but now I care a lot more about D&D and I want to learn about it. So, and I don't know what the beholders are, but after Tomer explaining it to me, I love them. They seem really cool.
So I think it's a lose-lose situation for Universes Beyond. Like, there's no way they will make Gandalf correct, right? People will be like, are you telling me Jace the Mind Sculptor is more powerful than Gandalf? But Gandalf's the greatest, like... And then when you start mixing in other IPs, you're telling me Superman can't beat Gandalf? Like, there's no way they can win.
Well,
and the only reason they get away
can't.
with it...
Actually, Richard, he can't because
I just print like kryptonite but also in Magic you can print multiple versions of a card, right? You're like, oh man, Tybalt's a meme. They're like, have Valky, right? Or Chandra's terrible. Like, don't worry, the 8th Chandra is the good Chandra. You're gonna get one shot at Gandalf. So either you make him so busted, right? Or it's gonna suck and that'll be a wrap, right? Like, you're not going to print 8 more Gandalfs, so I don't know what they're going to do about this.
You don't know that. War of the Spark 2 Gandalf shows up. It could happen. On top of that, no, but like legitimately, Superman is weak to magic, so he can't beat Gandalf.
Yeah.
Kryptonite and magic are like, I'm being serious. I'm dead serious.
Superman's going to be a 1-man, a 1/1 then in the world of magic, because he's not going to do anything.
And he is actually just a 1/1 vanilla creature.
I bolt your Superman. You're like,
oh!
okay.
Yeah, I knew obviously there would be people that were just upset about other IPs because we already had that whole thing with The Walking Dead. So that was pretty clear, but I had never really thought through the other aspect of people being upset because they felt like you did their favorite game or IP or whatever wrong with how you made the Magic card of it, which is definitely going to be interesting. And I don't really see how you can solve that either. There's always going to be people who are upset. So I guess hopefully the good outweighs the bad in the long run. And I think overall, the response to Forgotten Realms seemed pretty good to me. And I was kind of like Grim, where I don't really care about D&D, but it made me care a little bit more. And I found the lore. I found myself like looking up some of the lore. They'd print Vorpal Sword. I'd be like, wow, that's like a pretty cool ability. What is this in D&D? And I'd look it up on like the D&D wiki and read about it a little bit. So I think in that sense, it definitely did a good job. But it seems like a very difficult line to walk where you're just going to have people angry on like every side with things like Universes Beyond and Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, where you got Magic players mad, you got fans of the other IP that are also mad. And yeah, so I would not want to be a designer on one of those sets, I don't think.
Yeah, because they'd make you... I realize, what if... Oh, Seth, okay, just one last closing question before we close out today. If you had to work on the set, but hypothetically, if you didn't like Lord of the Rings, and they forced you to watch Lord of the Rings, how would that feel?
I would quit. I'm out of here. I love Magic, but there's a line that I cannot cross. I'll go work at McDonald's. You design your own Magic cards.
I will go do literally anything else as long as it does not force me to watch Lord of the Rings.
I can't believe we're playing a fantasy game.
Well, no,
we have such Lord of the Rings haters here. It like blows my mind. You're actually gonna tell me like you don't like shuffling cards or something? Like, I don't understand.
Actually,
maybe once we get
you're like, oh,
Universes
Elf
Beyond,
Deck,
I'll
pretty
like
cool.
Yeah,
I got a
It'll
whole
win me
franchise
over.
for you.
I mean, watching Seth shuffle, he did take a long time, so it does almost seem like watching Lord of the Rings.
I was not intentionally roping you, Grim. That was actually just my shuffling speed. Anyway, we've gone a little bit long today, Richard. Maybe can we sneak in a fish mail?
All right, let's sneak in a fish mail. If you have questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail. We'll get to your questions on air. Drunks. I tried some Flesh and Blood recently, and it's really good. How would you compare MTG Finance with Flesh and Blood Finance? Any chance we could get Flesh and Blood prices on the website? Have any of you guys played Flesh and Blood?
I did
or
not
know anything about it.
I didn't know a single thing about it except for that Olivia or Gobert Hicks, she's doing a cosplay for it for an event. And that is about it. And the game has very, very, very expensive cards. Like very expensive. But personally,
Like how very?
like I
Put a price on it.
I think I like saw a card when it was like circling around. It was like a queen or something like that, and it was like 1,000 or something. It was like $500, $800 or something like that. Which is expensive for a new card game. And I don't know. I don't know what she's about. I don't know why it's expensive. I don't know how anything works in that game. So, I'm always skeptical when it comes to new card games. Every time I get into a new card game, especially anime card games, they always crash and burn because they don't test, right? Like, I feel like their play design team, like the first set's always a banger. Second set, okay, cool. And then they release something that is so OP and broken that essentially every set afterwards is just Eldraine, like, V2, Eldraine V3. So that's what they do. They just keep dropping Eldraines. Their idea of balance is to power creep. So
Yeah.
that's my concern with getting into most new games. So what I would I usually just wait a few sets until I even look anything up. I wait until like about 5 sets, 6 sets have come out.
Yeah, I haven't played it yet. I have heard good things about it, and I've learned a little bit about it from Prof, Tillery Community College, doing some videos on it. So I've learned a little bit, and I do know that the prices are kind of insane. There's definitely cards that are tens of thousands of dollars for their first editions, and there's cards that are many cards that are hundreds to like $1,000, and like the first edition booster boxes sell for like $5,000. So the financial aspect is interesting. Whether or not there'll just be a reprint that'll bring down these prices, it's such a new game that it's kind of hard to tell. So I too am usually skeptical of new games, but there has been a decent amount of hype about this one, so we'll see. I think we'll know a lot more once they start doing their big GP things these fall. Like how many people are going to show up to Vegas for the Flesh and Blood equivalent of a GP that they're really kind of going all out on, and bringing in, the professor and bringing in cosplayers and doing all this Magic GP style stuff. Are there going to be a ton of Magic pros there? Are they going to have 3,000 people playing Flesh and Blood, or is it going to be a much smaller thing? So I think we'll know more in the near future once they start doing these big tournaments. But I do think that it does have financial implications for sure, and I don't believe that there is something like MTGGoldfish for Flesh and Blood at this point, where you can just easily, you gotta browse through eBay completed listings and stuff like that. I don't think there's an easy way to just pull up Flesh and Blood prices that I'm aware of.
So I'm skeptical because is Flesh and Blood based on some IP? What reason do I have for playing this game?
I don't believe it is. I think it's just a game.
Yeah, so that's a hard, it has to be the greatest game ever, and I can't think of it being like that, but you could play Runeterra, you can play Hearthstone, you can play anything with your favorite IP, you can play Magic the Gathering Universes Beyond, right? And even if the gameplay is mediocre, at least you're playing with Gandalf. Right, so for Flesh and Blood, if the gameplay is mediocre, it's kind of dead, right? It has to be really good. It has to build up its IP, and just hearing things like super expensive cards is a big turnoff to me. I don't know why things would be so expensive from the get go. How can rarity be a thing already? And it's not addressed, so that is question marks. I don't want another legacy or modern to play. I don't even want to afford standard, so that is question marks. But I'll take a look into it. I'm curious because there has been a lot of hype, although I do feel a lot of it is manufactured though. I feel a lot of it is sponsorships, and if you're selling cards for $10,000, then yeah, you can pay some creators to start pumping out content, right? So. We'll see how it goes.
I've definitely gone in a weird way though. I guess I've gone back into another card game recently in this time. So, but yeah, like, I mean, in the game itself has a lot of history, so I'm okay with paying the expensive prices that it asks. It's Pokemon. But like, but like, I don't, like, much like Richard said, this is a little early for there to be like Black Lotuses running around, right? I mean, well, everybody right now is trying to get in on it too, because like, well, yeah, maybe this is the Black Lotus. Maybe this is that, this. And much like every other card game before it that I've played, there's always that really expensive card. I don't know how that happens nowadays, but there's always this, like, you know, there's a new set and the game just came out and there's already a card. There's always a card that's like $800, like $900 or something like that. And I never understand how, but everybody buys it and the game flops. And then it's like, I spent how much? And then now it's like, I can't even get rid of it for more than $3. So
This sounds like you've heard of from experience.
I hurt from experience. Yes, actually. So, and this is why I always get burned. And so if the game itself, like Richard said, isn't good, it's hard for me to justify getting into it, because at least if it tanks in price, like the card I have, at least the game is fun. So this is one of those things where, as I had mentioned, I'm going to wait like a standard year, and then we're going to see how what it looks like then. So in about like 6 or 7 sets or something, that's when I'll check out Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, and one last thing, it's worth pointing out, like, the game is pretty early in its development. Its Reddit has like almost 7,000 members, and you compare that to like Magic TCG, which is pushing like 500,000. So I think the plan of waiting a little bit to see how the game develops and see if more people pick it up probably makes sense, especially with prices being so high. It would be hard to spend, you know, that amount of money on a game and then find out that it ends up flopping in the near future. And you just never know when a game's new. Maybe it becomes the next Magic and we're playing it, you know, 20 years from now, and maybe it goes the way of a lot of other new TCGs where there's immediate hype and then it just fades away. So I would not invest heavily at this point personally, but anyway.
All right. So thank you for the fish mail, Mr. Drunks or Mrs. Drunks or just Drunks.
I've always called them Dr. Unks.
Doctor. I like it. Dr. Unks.
Yeah.
Dr. Unks. If you have questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air.
And I believe that brings us to the end of episode 342 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. So Richard, Krim, thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And we will be back next week to talk about whatever goes on in the world of Magic. So until then, have an amazing week, everyone. And this is the crew signing out.